We got a guest. Our next guest, Seamus Bruner. Seamus Bruner is the director of research at the Government Accountability Institute. He's the author of the recently published Controligarchs, exposing the billionaire class, their secret deals, and the globalist plot to dominate your life. Seamus, that sounds very left-wing.
Seamus, if you're going to have trouble with any of the hosts on this show, it's going to be Rob.
Yeah.
Just bat him back right now.
I mean, I kind of know why I don't like billionaires, because they all tend to do exactly the same thing and they complain a lot. But what's wrong with what's a controligarch?
That's a great question, and I wrote this book to appeal across the political spectrum. It's actually much more important than a political book. This is an existential book. This is the billionaires are not all bad. Not all billionaires. Most billionaires are quite good, and there's 3,000 billionaires. This is only about 30 of them, and there's nothing wrong with making money. I mean, we're capitalists, so there's nothing wrong with making money, but it's what you do with that money. So I define a controligarch as a billionaire or bureaucrat who is plotting and scheming to dominate every aspect of everyone's life. They want to control every industry, from food to health to information. I mean, critically information. And once they have control over things like the food sector, or the information sector, the financial sector, they can turn the dials and pull the levers and nudge you in certain directions. And they really want to change your behavior. You see that with their control over the energy sector, actually. Banning gas stoves, banning gas vehicles, banning cows.
So, Seamus, you're not saying this is not the old charge that used to be leveled against John D. Rockefeller Sr., that he was using his money to corner markets and make even more money. He was using his money for profit. You're saying that there are 30 billionaires who are using effectively they're giving, explain this, but they're using their money for ideological purposes. I'm going to guess that one of the 30 you mentioned in your book is George Soros, for example. Give us 2 or 3 names.
Yeah, so George Soros, of course, he gets his own chapter, and we talk about the Open Society mission and how he uses things like, who could be against an open society? It sounds lovely. And who could be against things like a democracy initiative or democracy partners? But he really inverts the meaning of these words by buying off very small election. We see it with the prosecutors and sowing chaos in our cities, opening the prisons. George Soros is sort of a special controligarch, but the other ones, you've got Bill Gates, of course, at the top there, and then all of the guys who go to the World Economic Forum and talk about things like going cashless or implementing digital IDs that are effectively going to be social credit scores. I thought the reason I wrote this book is because there's all these things that sound like crazy conspiracy theories, and then you dig in and you see, well, actually, no, they do want to use a form of digital ID to track movements and track activities. And if you are going the wrong places, doing the wrong things, buying the wrong things, you'll get, you'll have sort of this social credit score. We see it right now in Ireland. If you're attending protests or riots, whatever the case may be, they want to take away your right to free speech. And actually, they're talking about taking away the entitlements of these protesters, like taking away, Europe's got more of a welfare state, but they've got sort of universal basic incomes. They want to freeze their assets. You saw it in Canada with the truckers. They wanted to freeze the trucker protests' assets.
So the motivation here would be what? These are people who are already so rich that the usual motivation that still affects most of us, which is paying the mortgage, setting something aside for retirement, they blew past that ages and ages ago. The mere accumulation of money after a certain level becomes uninteresting to them. I'm trotting this out to see if you approve of this, if this is right. And so all their gratification shifts from earning profits to doing good. And they define doing good as, in one way or another, manipulating the way the rest of us live in the interest of George Soros has a particular and I think skewed sense of justice. Bill Gates is on and on about the planet and how we need to shift from eating beef to eating, I don't know what, grasshoppers or grass or something.
Bugs, yeah. Bugs.
So have I got that? These billionaires, of whom the rest of us should be, on red alert, because in one way or another they're coming after us. To them, they're doing good. That's all they want to do with all their pile of money is to do good. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the chapter 1 is called The Good Club. They actually formed this club called The Good Club. That should be a big red flag right there.
Yeah.
You'd think they could come up with something a little more creative. And so the first meeting of The Good Club was in May 2009. Bill Gates convened the meeting. It was at Rockefeller University in New York. George Soros was a co-sponsor. There were other billionaires there, Oprah Winfrey, Ted Turner, among about 10 others. And so they get together in May 2009.
The great intellects of our age.
Yeah, yes, right. The people who want to save the planet. It's a very ambitious goal. And so they get together and they say, well, Barack Obama's just been elected. We've all spent an enormous amount of money and influence to get him there. It's also in kind of the tail end of the global financial crisis. So there's this populist resentment rising up amongst the people who've all been foreclosed upon. And these guys all made a boatload of money. People like Warren Buffett, BlackRock is a Controligarch entity. And so they get together and they say, what should we spend all of our money on? We've got this great president who can do what we want. And they basically all unify around this cause of overpopulation. And you hear Bill Gates talk about it. And this is another one of those things that is, conspiracy theorist fodder that I wanted to get to the bottom of. And overpopulation. So is the Earth overpopulated? I mean, that's a debate that we should be having. Some people say absolutely not. It's we've got plenty of space. If you've ever traveled by airplane over most countries.
Let me guess. They never say to each other, there are far too many billionaires. They all say there are far too many peasants.
Exactly right. And so George Soros has got 5 kids. Ted Turner's got 5 or 6 kids. So actually, Ted Turner has proposed that entrepreneurial, enterprising peasants could actually sell their fertility rights. I mean, it's a new thing I had never heard of, fertility rights. So if you're poor and you want to make some money,
carbon offsets.
Yeah, it's like a carbon offset, a child offset. You could sell it to, a billionaire who might want to have more than 2.
Okay, so these guys are lefty nuts, and the only reason that we pay attention to them, should pay attention to them, but we should, is that they are so rich and so well connected in the technocracy that runs much of the country that they're coming after us, and they can actually get to, okay. Now, one more question before I toss it over to Steve Hayward. And you don't know Steve as well as I do, but I can tell from his eyes that he's desperate to get in here. So are there any of these billionaires who are doing good? Are there any who are giving their fortunes to the charter school movement or to the founding of new churches? Are there any who are proceeding with a certain humility and actually giving their money away and toward causes of which we might approve?
Certainly. There are many good billionaires out there. This book isn't about them, but and I don't want to.
That's the book that wouldn't sell.
Yeah.
right. One day. But no, the billionaires who fund like causes like our own. So you can look those individuals up. They're great American patriots and the funders of charter schools especially. And I don't want to caricature these guys on the cover of the book. I mean, I certainly don't. I get deep into their history and kind of find out what makes them tick. And Bill Gates, for example, he's rebranded as this philanthropist. So he's not the guys in this book. They're not giving to those good causes, but they do, I'm sure, give to good causes. I mean, they give enormous sums of money, but if you were to look at a pie chart, it would be like the width of a paperclip on the pie chart. The money that they are spending, like Bill Gates, for example, he was never very charitable at all. I read his father's memoirs and accounts from his siblings and accounts from Microsoft employees while he had a much more active role in the company. By all accounts, he was brutal. I mean, his sister said he was, quote, nasty. His mother and father.
So this is John D. Rockefeller Sr. This is a man who was absolutely ruthless in acquiring his fortune, who's now rebranding himself as a man who gives dimes to children.
Well, it's brilliant of you to bring up that comparison, and I get into it in the book. And
Brilliance is sort of what I do, Seamus, as Rob will tell you.
Yeah, of course. That's his industry.
Well, actually, it's fascinating that the Rockefellers and John D. were a prototype, a Controligarch prototype, where it was only after the Justice Department started looking into the practices of Standard Oil, or in Bill Gates's case, Microsoft, that they set up their foundations. And then they set up these foundations. In John D.'s case, starts giving dimes out. In Bill Gates's case, starts giving out $1 million checks to schools and libraries. Now, was he just trying to help the kids learn, or was he trying to implement things like social emotional learning, this intentionally vague term that does away with arithmetic and science and math and puts in things like DEI into kids' brains? But it's more like brainwashing. But anyhow, Bill Gates, on her deathbed, his mother was pleading with him. He's now the richest man. It's the mid-90s, and he's been the world's richest man for 20 of the last 30 years. She says, please give some of your money to charity. He still would not until he sets up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, you should watch some of the antitrust depositions where they're questioning Bill Gates about his practices. It's very Clintonian, how he's like, I don't know what you mean by cut off the air supply to my competitors. But he sets up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, rebrands, becomes this great philanthropist, and since then he's gotten into a lot of industries. Now Bill Gates he's a farmer, he's a doctor, he's an educator. He's got a lot of hats that he wears. But it's not a problem that he wants to invest. He kind of says, "Oh, I'm just investing in farmland to diversify my holdings." But what we found at the Government Accountability Institute is he's using the same tactic that Microsoft used. It was called embrace, extend, extinguish, where he enters an industry, extends his reach, and then works to extinguish and cut off the competition. Now, that the way they're doing that to the farmers is with all these climate change regulations and emissions standards, and to save the planet ostensibly. But I can tell you the fake meats that he invests in, Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, a lot of these lab-grown meats that are coming up, they're more energy intensive. I mean, nobody knows sustainability better than a farmer. They go out of business if they don't treat the land and be good stewards of the soil. So these companies that are growing it in labs are much more emitting of what Bill Gates would call greenhouse gases.
Yeah. Seamus, it's Steve Hayward out in California. By the way, there's something quaint. I'm glad you mentioned
Farmer Steve, we call him.
Well, I did grow grapes for a little while, once upon a time. It's funny that you would mention Bill Gates in the antitrust business, because this now is sort of ancient history. But what we were afraid of was, oh my God, Internet Explorer might dominate the browser market, which nowadays, this just shows you the problem with antitrust. But sort of go back, I started spending some time around Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, almost 30 years ago now, because I'm getting old. And there were two things that struck me. One was, especially in the case of Gates, like, why is the government coming after us? What did we do wrong? I mean, yeah, we're tough competitors, but they didn't get it. They didn't understand politics. Instead, the dominant mentality, and I know Peter probably sees this because he lives there, is your tech entrepreneurs don't understand politics. They don't understand why social problems aren't solved like engineering problems. They're actually social engineers. They don't realize that social engineering is for all kinds of reasons that we all know, is a ridiculous idea. They think they're smarter than we are, because why shouldn't they think that? They've made all this money and given us all this technological progress. And I think the apotheosis of this was seen a few months ago, or I guess last year now, with the downfall of Sam Bankman-Fried. Now, we follow all his crypto shenanigans, but the part that arrested me, and still does, was the fascination with effective altruism.
Yes.
And why were they going to be effective? Because they're smarter than the rest of us and know better. The implicit understanding of that, by the way, is that what the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation have been doing for decades was ineffective. I have to say, this is another moment of Schadenfreude, which has sort of been a theme here today. But so there's this hubris they have, and that they're smarter than us. And that's what makes them dangerous. I mean, Carnegie, and here's the distinction. These guys want to change the world because they have a vision. The older billionaires like Carnegie, they thought, in Carnegie's case, he thought it was an obligation to give back on moral grounds, right? He thought if he died with any money at all, he'd go to hell. And the Rockefellers, it's a mixed bag, but they want to do good. But no, this new class has got they're a completely different class of billionaire. By the way, that's why I love your title, Controligarch. I think that's absolutely perfect. They don't see any reason why they shouldn't be in control. Deep down inside, they're contemptuous of democracy. Sorry, Seamus, this isn't really a question. It's a long rant, but I wonder if you could.
It's a wonderful rant. You're nailing it, Steve. You're nailing it. Go on. Continue.
No, I just, that's sort of my observation is this is a different class of philanthropy and quite sinister.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. So there's this great MIT professor, Joseph Wiesenbaum, and he actually captures exactly what you just said by saying, I mean, they basically have a God complex. Why? Because they've built their own worlds, these digital worlds, things like Meta and Facebook and Microsoft, and they think because they can turn the dials and pull the levers in their own digital worlds and get their intended results there, and everything's perfect and to their liking, that they can export that ability to the real world. And that's the problem, because they can't. You can't social engineer. All you can do is try to control people. And Americans, we don't want to be controlled. And that's one of the big problems. I mean, the number one goal of these controligarchs, just the people in this book, not all billionaires, obviously, but just these guys, is they want to transfer power from individuals and from even countries to international institutions, things like the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, institutions they control, supranational organizations. And so, I mean, that's how George Soros sort of plays into this. He wants to abolish borders. I mean, a lot of the chaos that we're seeing in our lives now, from open borders to crime in our cities to even inflations, is really about weakening nations so that international institutions can swoop in and save the day.
So, aside from buying your book, which, however, is not to be neglected, the name of the book is Controligarchs, and you can get it on Amazon or anywhere else that books are sold.
Or any other monopolistic platform.
Exactly.
Give money to Jeff Bezos.
Buy it from your local bookstore, please.
Aside from buying your book, Seamus, what should we do? What can is there scope somehow for a peasants' revolt?
Well, visionary, World Economic Forum visionary Yuval Noah Harari says, no, there's no hope. Abandon all hope, you peasants. The peasant revolts of previous centuries are impossible today.
Right.
I think I have great hope. I think there's an awakening happening amongst the people. I mean, on the right, conservatives, the debate for at least 40 years has been, tax cuts and regulation, that's our economic policy. And we're starting to realize that the big corporations do not have our best interests in mind. And so previously, one might defend corporations like Microsoft or Meta. No, the debate of the future, and we're starting to wake up to this, is over artificial intelligence, which is going to bring about you're already hearing calls for a universal basic income, UBI, and Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, off and on again, head of OpenAI, ChatGPT's maker, he says that UBI is coming because job losses are coming, big job losses, and it's going to hit the professional classes first. I mean, you may be listening and thinking, well, I'm safe from, I use AI right now. Just know you are training your replacement. And so when everybody starts losing their jobs, and you'll see more and more videos of people in their car crying about how they can't afford rent or groceries in their tragic videos, the UBI will be pitched as the solution. Well, we can just give you a meager, monthly check and you'll be fine. Sam Altman, by the way, says it will be a $13,500 check. And you may
he already knows the figure.
Yeah, for all 250 million working Americans, it'll be $13,500, and you may think, well, that ain't bad. I could make ends meet on $13,500 a month. No, it's $13,500 per year, according to Sam Altman's manifesto about the coming AI revolutions.
And so what about, do we back our own billionaires? Do we back the good billionaires? Is there any hope of a Godzilla versus King Kong? We've got Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and David Sachs and Joe Lonsdale. And in New York, there's Cliff Asness. I mean, there are Cliff Asness. I should finish pronouncing his name. There are good guy billionaires who seem, I won't say they're all spoiling. Elon Musk does seem to be a man who enjoys a fight. He's spoiling for a fight. But the people I just named are willing to fight. Do we just repose our hope in them and hope that Godzilla defeats King Kong?
Well, number one, we need to wake up and spread the word about what's coming and what these guys are up to before they close the loop and close the net around us. But so that's the first thing, is you got to be aware. You got to have the facts. You got to be able to articulate these facts convincingly to your peers and your friends and your family, and evangelize. That we don't want to be controlled. Number two, there's a big imbalance between the George Soros ATM machine and the Silicon Valley elites, the guys in this book. I mean, they are spending enormous sums, and we have great funders on the right. You mentioned them, and they're very generous. And study after study shows that conservatives are more generous than liberals. But there's an imbalance. There just is on funding causes on the right, and so. Not to say that they need to spend more, but they really do. We may never match the George Soros ATM machine, but it's important that we try.
One more question before I repose your final moments in the tender hands of Rob Long. And here's the question. I'm very impressed. This isn't a question. I'm going to give a little speech myself here, but I'm tremendously impressed by you and the other people that Peter Schweitzer has gathered around himself in Florida, because what you are doing is something that used to be known as journalism. Your book is researched. You've interviewed people. You've gone through documents. You have a thesis, and you write a book about it. The institutions that are capable, the legacy institutions, the New York Times and on, that are capable of long-form journalism are garbage. They're just not doing real journalism. There are some exceptions, but only some exceptions. So just tell us very briefly tell us who Peter Schweitzer is. Tell us what you guys are up to.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to hear you say that, and I will pass along your kind words to Peter Schweitzer. He's an investigative legend for those who haven't heard of him. He is my personal hero and mentor. I've worked with him since 2011, so over a decade I've been working with Peter Schweitzer. I thought I wanted to go into politics, by the way. I studied poli-sci. I thought I might want to be a politician or something someday.
Oh, my God.
Interning for Peter Schweitzer for 6 months disabused me of those notions, and I find it much more gratifying and helpful to be exposing the corruption. So I've worked with him on the books Clinton Cash, Secret Empires, and I'm kind of the nerd that Schweitzer says, okay, now just go take 5,000 pages of Clinton Foundation 990 filings and make some sense of it. And so I follow the money is our motto. So I put everything into a spreadsheet. It's what I did for this book. I put all the figures into a spreadsheet and just start filtering and sorting, and eventually something like a Uranium One speech where they're paying Bill Clinton $500,000 in Moscow will pop out. But yeah, it's atrocious what the mainstream media has become, the legacy media, New York Times, and we're seeing a renaissance now. People like Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss, and just like the Substack has really done such wonders for investigative journalism. And so I think that's what gives me hope, really, is there are people out there who still are digging through the mountain of crap that is thrown at us from, you get a FOIA request, either they give you nothing or they give you a mountain of nothing. Right, and right. So it's, we're working on trying to use some of these AI tools that they're putting out to expose the people who really want to control our lives. So I actually got Bing GPT. I was on the wait list and beta user for it. And it was amazing because I was searching Bing GPT for dirt on Bill Gates, and it initially was turning up some great results. And within a month, it was like, it starts talking back to me saying, well, why do you think Bill Gates isn't altruistic? And I'm like, well, altruistic is kind of an interesting word. Like, how do you define altruistic, Mr. Bing or Mr. and Mrs. Bing?
Hey, Seamus, the other side. I hope this book sells and sells and sells, and I hope that by the time I'm going to guess you're 35 is still a few years away for you. I hope by the time you're 35, you're on the way to becoming a Bill Gates of your own. But
no, why would you wish that juju on me?
The other side pays better. You're aware of that, are you?
That's right.
Yeah, we're not in it for the money. This is a nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Over to Rob.
Huge mistake, the nonprofit part. So here's my real question. I mean, I I'm not really scared of people trying to control me. I'm scared of people trying to make my life better and do good for me. That the altruism that you said, like that's what I'm scared of. I'm scared of people thinking, well, you know what, if we let you make your own decisions, they're going to be messy and complicated and chaotic, and you might make the wrong one. We just went through 2.5 years of that. That was essentially the subtitle of COVID-19. Do what we tell you to do, even if it's not really important or necessary, because it's can make life simpler. And I think there's something attractive about that, not just for the billionaires, but for people. People acquiesce to this. People complain when the world isn't risk-free. They complain when, well, I know I have to do this all by myself. They complain when there's no government or no official bureau or app to solve a problem. I understand you're focusing on 30 billionaires who have the billions of dollars, but
aren't we the problem?
The reason they have power and influence is because they're selling something that's very attractive to a whole lot of people.
No, I mean, you that's exactly right. I mean, I talk about it where it's like slipping into a warm bubble bath of tyranny. I mean, it's very easy. That's kind of one of the scary things about it. It's so convenient. And I do applaud them. Again, I said I don't want to caricature them in the book, and I didn't. I applaud them for a lot of the tools they've made that have made life easier, right down to the Rockefellers. They made life better in a lot of ways. But what's coming down the pike with the AI revolution, we don't need to be scared of AI. I mean, we hopefully can use it for all good things, but the power that it has, and this is the economic debate of the future over UBI and whether people, a lot of people think about the UBI as like, oh, well, I'll just be able to finally take those guitar lessons and pick up painting right. and culinary classes, and it's just going to be lovely. And that's the thing, it's not going to be lovely. And working hard for a living is gratifying, and trying to take that away from people is actually evil in a way, I think. But anyhow, you're right. We, not you and me on this podcast, but we as in the non-Controligarchs are part of the problem, because we saw it in the pandemic, how many people turned into Karens. And I mean, our own family members wouldn't let us into their houses without masks. And the masks became like a safety blanket. I mean, you still see people wearing masks I live in
New York City. I see them all the time. Yeah.
All the time. So that is a problem. And waking up, I mean, we can have convenience. I mean, we live at the greatest time in human history. I mean, it's amazing. Maybe 20 years ago might have been better, but in any case,
this is actually statistically the best time.
It is. I mean, you can have a meal delivered to your door within a matter of minutes at the tap of a button. It's an incredible time to be alive, but we also do need to wake up and take some personal responsibility. I guess go outside and touch grass maybe once in a while, but we may end up like China, is all the warning is. The West may end up closer to a system like China. I mean, Klaus Schwab talks about stakeholder capitalism, and it sounds so lovely. We've got all these stakeholders. Right. They don't consider us stakeholders. We don't get a seat at the table, just like we didn't get a seat at the table during the pandemic. These problems, things like climate change, are too big for the peasant class to understand. They need to be solved by global institutions. And everyone to a man in this book, right down to Bill Gates and Fauci, they all praised China's response to COVID, and they said that the ability of the CCP they use euphemisms like mobilize resources or their quote efficiency or something, and like we know what that's code word for. It's code word for brutal authoritarianism, where the people don't have a say and wrong and pointless. And so all the people who just kind of are slipping into this warm bubble bath of convenience. They're not going to like a system like that. They're not going to like the facial recognition cameras. They're not going to like the weekend driving privileges lost for disinformation and all of that. So,
but it's hard to choose. It's hard to choose the hard way, right? I mean, when I come home and I'm up traveling abroad and I get land in the airport and I sort of breeze through and I do. Global entry. I don't even show my passport. I just look into the camera. It's kind of great, but I hear you. Okay. The book is called Controligarchs: Exposing the Billionaire Class, the Secret Deals, and the Globalist Plot to Dominate Your Life. The author is Seamus Bruner. Seamus, thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys so much. This was a real pleasure.
Seamus, parody. Think in terms of parody. I want you to infiltrate some parties at Davos and do an update on Tom Wolfe's Radical Chic.
All right, I'm going to make note of that. I'll see what I can
tell
do.
Schweitzer whatever he has in mind for you. That's what I have in mind. Will you please?
Yeah, if I end up in a Swiss prison, I'll thank you for that.
Even better.
Those are nice, by the way.
Think of all the writing. Think of all the writing you could get done in prison.
You could be in a lot worse places.
That's probably true. It's probably quite nice over there in prison.
Think of all the Toblerone they'd serve you. Great to have you.
All right, take care, guys.
Thanks, Seamus.
Bye.
The Hyundai Getaway Sales Event is the season for the best deals. This means special finance offers and bonus cash that add up to big savings. Choose Werner Hyundai and you'll get even more savings with complimentary maintenance for 5 years. That's free oil changes, car washes, tire rotations, and more for 5 years. All new Hyundais come with America's best warranty and roadside assistance. All pre-owned Hyundais come with the balance of the new Hyundai warranty. These deals won't last. 'Tis the season to shop Werner Hyundai.
As the year comes to an end, so will the deals. This is the perfect time to upgrade your ride at Werner Kia. Buy now and enjoy 0% APR or no payments for 6 months. There's no need to shop around. Werner Kia will beat any valid offer on a new Kia. Buy $500 or pay you $1,000. Don't wait any longer. Get the season's best deals now so you can upgrade to a nicer car. Make the switch to Werner Kia. Offer details at wernerkia.com.
Oh, make that switch to Werner Kia.
Well, thank God I'm not a billionaire. That's all I can say.
Yeah, exactly. I once
wait
heard.
a minute. If you were, Rob, you would be running the counteroffensive again. You're insufficiently alarmed, Rob. You do know these people want to take your gas stove away from you, and as a serious chef, those are not fighting words.
In Santa Monica, where I used to live, I rented in Santa Monica for many years before I moved to Venice. Before I moved to New York, it was early days. They put out a ordinance where every new toilet had to be a low flow toilet. One of those toilets doesn't really work, right? And all these, Santa Monica's filled. People's Republic of Santa Monica, they call it. All these billionaire environmentalists, right? They were all in favor of this, but when they redid their houses for their millions of dollars, they didn't want that. So, but in order to get the certificate of occupancy, you got to have an inspection, and that inspector is going to look and make sure those toilets are like low flow toilets. So what they would do is they would install the low-flow toilets in all the bathrooms. They get the inspection, and then they would swap out the low-flow toilets for the really good ones, the Japanese ones that basically are like Niagara Falls. And so I think at some point someone estimated that there were 25 low-flow toilets in the entire city of Santa Monica. They just kept rotating from house to house to house to house. So I guess my only comfort I take from this, from the book and from what Seamus was saying, was that the great news here is that the billionaires are almost always wrong. They almost always make terrible errors. They think they're so smart, even the ones that we might be sympathetic to, and they make these classic blunders. Sometimes it gets us all killed. Sometimes they lose a lot of money. Sometimes nothing happens. But this stuff never works. So I guess that's what I'm comforting myself with, but maybe I am insufficiently alarmed.
Yeah, they do a lot of great damage along the way, though. I mean, one case in point, just one, is the Ford Foundation, going back 50 years ago. One of their biggest grant areas was overpopulation, and they bankrolled International Planned Parenthood to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, and led to some real horrors like, forced sterilizations in India and such. There's a great book on this called Fatal Misconception by a historian of Columbia, who's otherwise a liberal, but it's very savage. And by the way, even the New York Times now says, just in the last month, maybe falling fertility is going to be a real problem for the next century. Which, by the way, this is like the universities. Julian Simon, Peter knows he was, they were saying this 40, 50 years ago. We have been saying conservatives about universities for the last 25 years. And, boy, we have one after the other. We get to say, I told you so. But there we are.
Yeah, I told you so. That sounds that's sort of weak sauce when everything's rubble. But you're right. Yeah. I mean, that is. I do comfort myself that way.
I was aware of Seamus, and I was aware of his book. He's even better than I expected. He's well spoken,
right? Yeah.
I mean, he's well spoken. He's hardworking. So I really do take a lot of comfort. Rob and Steve, all three of us love good journalism. And all three of us are of an age so that we saw with our own eyes the journalism business model collapse, just collapse.
Right.
All three of us in one way or another. I mean, we've had this conversation over drinks How many times over the years? Where's the new business model going to come from? How can you save the New York Times? How can you revive the Washington Post? Well, here's where it comes from. Peter Schweitzer's put together half a dozen really bright guys like Seamus in West Palm Beach, Florida, of all places. Barry Weiss is in Montecito with something called the Free Press Online. Schellenberger is up in San Francisco. Matt Taibbi, I don't even know where Matt Taibbi is. But Alex Berenson from his home in Rye, I think it is, someplace in upstate New York. Good journalism is beginning to get done. New institutions, new voices. I find that I have lived to hear the first shots of the counter-revolution. That's the way I feel.
Well, that's sort of optimistic, Peter. It's good for the holiday season.
The paradox is brought to us by some billionaires who were otherwise a problem, right? I mean,
that's right.
The internet has lowered the barriers of entry to this, which is a great thing.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
But that is also the problem with billionaires, is that they, or rich people in general, is that it's just irresistible to resist the idea that I'm rich because I'm really smart.
Yes.
And I figured it out and you didn't.
Yes.
And you know what? I'm really smart in this one area. I mean, you could say this about Elon Musk. Very, very brilliant guy, right? I mean, we're going to go to Mars because of Elon Musk. He built an electric car. Nobody said he could do that. Then he comes head to head with an ad-supported media business, and he's floundering. And he's pretending that it's someone else's fault, whereas in fact he purchased an ad-supported media business and now is complaining about the terms of that ad-supported media business, which is a little bit, kind of like a comeuppance for somebody who's fairly arrogant. But that's okay. That's all right. That is what the market is supposed to do. The problem really is when these sort of when the comeuppance doesn't happen because they are not part of the market. Instead, they're part of the regulatory system, which doesn't ever have a comeuppance. We never lose regulations. We never lose bureaus. We never lose people telling us, how many gallons are in our toilet tank. We only get more and more and more of them. And the solution isn't to replace those people with people who agree with me. The solution is to get rid of that altogether.
Yeah, instead we get the opposite. For my entire adult life, you will hear Ralph Nader or some other person on the left say, regulation of X or Y has failed. Therefore, we need more and better regulation.
Yes,
they never seem to draw the right
right
conclusion from this, right? That's amazing.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Oh my.
Well, fellas, I mean, I don't even want to bring this up because I'm so exhausted by it. But it does seem that this is, am I right? This is the Hunter Biden endgame here. The indictments that came back down yesterday are sort of isn't it?
I think it's a very big deal. I think it's a very, very big deal, and now means it cannot be avoided next year. It is also, I don't want to, I'll put on a tiny tinfoil hat and say, curious that this indictment was not issued until after the deadlines had passed for someone serious to file against Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination. I'll just put it that way.
There's all that.
That's good tinfoil hatism. I like it. I like it.
We have, if you look at one of the debates, I guess it was the first debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Biden says, this is a close reconstruction if I'm not quoting him exactly, nobody made money on China. The only person who made money on China was this guy, and he points at Trump. He was lying through his teeth. He was lying to the American people in an election year. That is a danger to democracy. And now we know he did it. No thanks to the mainstream media, but thanks to James Comer and some very dogged, terribly uncool Republicans in the House of Representatives. But yesterday, Biden's lawyers, so he's being indicted for tax evasion to the tune of $1.6 million, if I recall the figure. And Biden's lawyers had the effrontery to say that if his name was anything other than Biden, this case would never have been brought. If his name was anything other than Biden, he'd be in prison right now. It's staggering. It is just staggering. Now, if you start thinking through the politics of this thing, what does it do? My fear is that it kind of numbs the entire electorate to serious criminal charges. Oh, well, doesn't matter that Trump has been indicted because now Hunter Biden has been indicted. These should be taken seriously, and my concern is that in some way they may neutralize each other in the practice of practical politics. But it sure feels like just a touch of justice.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that, Peter. I mean, if you think back to Whitewater and the Clintons, complicated land deal they lost money on, and then ultimately the impeachment over, sex scandal, which people said, ew, but that doesn't really rise to. I think that this is such obvious self-dealing, such obvious influence peddling, that even an independent voter or someone who's not especially ideological is going to say this really stinks, and I don't like these people.
That it does seem like classic government influence peddling corruption, plus tax evasion, which makes everybody mad. But what's interesting about it is the only reason we had
to do to get away with it was pay his stinking taxes. Yeah. He could have kept millions of dollars.
Yeah, like Al Capone.
By the way, I don't know if you've seen the itemization of what he spent his money on. That's in the indictment. It's really shocking. It looked like fun. Yeah. Hundreds of thousands of dollars on women. I think that's the itemization, the line item.
Yeah. But the only reason we have this sort of 56 or whatever it is, 50-plus page indictment is because the plea deal was thrown out in the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, this wasn't the stately pace of justice. This was a weird, unexpected judge tossing out a plea deal in August that ended up with the same prosecutor coming back with this kind of. The size of this indictment suggests that there had to have been something going on before that plea deal was thrown out, because you don't go from a plea deal, which is going to be fine, to suddenly this guy's going to do time for 4 or 5 years, right? That's. I mean, I'm no lawyer. We need John Yoo here, but that seems like a bizarre swing. From we're not going to touch him to actually we're going to throw the book at him. That's an interesting story that I can't wait to be told, but probably won't be told for a few years. But I'd love to know. Speaking of FOIAs, I'd love to have those conversations FOIA'd, because that would be a really interesting story. But speaking of interesting stories, this story is coming to an end. Thank you, fellas, for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Shopify. Support them by supporting us, please. Go to ricochet.com/join. Become part of the last remaining sane sliver of the internet, we promise you. And if you can, take a minute to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I know we keep saying that. I know it just people don't even hear it, but it actually really, really matters. It gets us up on the AI algorithm, helps defeat the automatic brain that's trying to defeat us. And happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Today's the first day.
It started last night. I think last night was the first night.
First night. First night was last night. You're right.
And Steve, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure. See you on down the road.
Next week, fellas.
Next week, boys.
Ricochet. Join the conversation.
The Hyundai Getaway Sales Event is the season for the best deals. This means special finance offers and bonus cash that add up to big savings. Choose Werner Hyundai and you'll get even more savings with complimentary maintenance for 5 years. That's free oil changes, car washes, tire rotations, and more for 5 years. All new Hyundais come with America's best warranty and roadside assistance. All pre-owned Hyundais come with the balance of the new Hyundai warranty. These deals won't last. 'Tis the season to shop Werner Hyundai.
As the year comes to an end, so will the deals. This is the perfect time to upgrade your ride at Werner Kia. Buy now and enjoy 0% APR or no payments for 6 months. There's no need to shop around. Werner Kia will beat any valid offer on a new Kia. Buy $500 or pay you $1,000. Don't wait any longer. Get the season's best deals now so you can upgrade to a nicer car. Make the switch to Werner Kia. Offer details at wernerkia.com.
Oh, make that switch to Werner Kia.